Oh, are we ready to go?
Yeah, all right.
Okay, hey, thank you all for joining us. We have several people here in our lab. And we have Mr. Hank Rogers in New York City. And, we always welcome all of you to come to our leadership seminar series. We also have our past associate dean joining us as well. So we're gonna get started. We're gonna have the students introduce you, Hank, and I know a lot of people are really looking forward to hearing your story about Tetris, as well as all your other foundation work that you're doing to help save this planet and travel to Mars.
There you go.
So, okay, here you go, you guys. Who's Ellie? Okay, Ellie's gonna introduce you. Thanks much, Hank.
Okay, hi everyone. My name is Ellie and with me today is Adam. So we'd like to welcome everyone to the first leadership seminar of the spring 2023 semester presented by the Hayashida family. So we've got a great speaker here today. Let's jump right in. Adam will start off by introducing today's speaker, Henk Rogers.
So from international gaming phenomenon to game-changing initiatives, Dutch-born entrepreneur and innovator Henk Rogers continues to pave the way in regenerating our home planet and working toward establishing permanent human settlements on the moon and Mars. Starting his career in computer gaming more than 3 decades ago, Rogers revolutionized the industry by creating Japan's first role-playing game and later bringing the legendary game Tetris to the world. Since then, Rogers has dedicated his career to research, development, advocacy, and implementation of renewable energy sources in his adopted home of Hawaii. His Blue Planet Foundation, based out of Honolulu, has led efforts to pass the nation's first 100% renewable energy mandate. And his newest initiative, Blue Planet Alliance, based out of New York City, is expanding Blue Planet Foundation's mandate first, business model second approach to international regions and countries. BPA is driving global by developing projects that change behaviors of people, companies, towns, and countries towards sustainability. In an effort to expand life beyond to the moon and Mars, Rogers has also established the International Moon-Based Alliance, which leaders in space exploration across private, public, and academic sectors. Rogers continues to explore renewable energy and space development opportunities through his Blue Planet research, which conducts R&D at his Opry Ranch on Hawaii Island. Let's now, Hank, begin with any opening remarks you'd like to share.
Are you, sorry, your voice was weird. You asking me?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, well, hello from freezing New York. It's 20 degrees out there and windy. I just came from outside, bundled up. So yeah, should I just launch in?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd like the format today. I hope you guys have questions because, I want you guys to be nosy. I'm going to talk for about 15 minutes and then open it up to Q&A. And please ask interesting questions. So actually, Adam just gave my speech. So actually, we can go straight to the Q&A. No, so my name is Henk Rogers, born in the Netherlands, moved to New York when I was 11 years old, learned English because I didn't speak any English before that. Ended up living in New York for 8 years, junior high school and high school. I went to a high school called Stuyvesant High School, which is the top math and science high school, maybe one of the top schools in the country. Of course, not as good as Punahou or whatever, but this is a public school, okay? So I went to school for free. My parents no more money. Anyway, so moved to Hawaii when I was 18, and we moved to lived in the windward side, Laie. That was an accident. We didn't know where we were going. We didn't know anything about Hawaii, and we just needed a place to live for a while, and ended up living on the windward side for a year. It was supposed to be like a couple of weeks. I, during that time, became a surfer and a diver, fell in love with the ocean and everything about the ocean and everything about Hawaii. I remember leaving New York. The day I left New York, it was snowing. It was the first day of snow, and I landed in Hawaii, and everybody was bundled up, and they said, "You got to be kidding me." I got there and I put my shirts on, and it was so nice and warm. Anyway, that was my first experience in Hawaii. I went to university. I ended up going to university. So I first got to touch computers when I was in high school. We were a special school. I guess somebody had gifted us computers back in the days of punch cards. And you know, just to give you an idea of the workflow, I would turn in my punch cards today, and 2 days later, I would get a printout of the result of my program. And so I cheated because that was just too long for me. So I made 6 copies of my program and put it in all of the drawers of all the other classes. And so I had to turn around of like 3 hours instead of 2 days. And teachers thought I was a genius, which I guess I was. So then I ended up in Hawaii, and I was working in Waikiki actually at a little jewelry shop, cutting gems and making jewelry. And the reason for that was because my dad was in the gem business, in the jewelry business. So I thought I might as well learn something about it. And one day I was putting the newspapers down on the floor because we're actually refining gold. Can you imagine that? So I'm putting the newspapers on the floor, and the centerfold of the newspaper was UH Manoa night school. And there were computer classes. I could actually touch a computer. And I said, oh yeah, I'm totally going to night school and have a chance to be on the computer. So I took all the night courses that I could take in computer science. And I took all the courses that were fun courses like astronomy or oceanography or geology. Those are fun courses for me. I like science. And then at the end of about a year, my teacher said, you know, you've taken all of the computer classes that we offer in night school. So if you want to have more computer time, you're going to have to go to day school. Well, let me back up to high school a little bit. I went to a very special high school, and I was very disappointed. Why was I disappointed? I thought high school was going to be, we get to do projects and we get to do experiments. And, you know, my imagination was way off the end of the scale. And what actually happened to me is I sat in a classroom, got a textbook, and we had to memorize stuff for the test. So that really pissed me off. And as I said, I'm not going to college. I had no intention of going to university. I said, I'm not going. I've been there, done that. I don't want to memorize another goddamn thing. Well, my teacher said, if you want to go get more computer time, you're going to have to go to day school. I said, okay, grudgingly, grumbly, I went and applied for day school. I'd never taken an SAT because I had no intention of going to university. Somehow they let me in based on my straight A's that I got in night school. And then I basically majored in computer science and minored in Dungeons and Dragons. So if you go back in time, the campus center, we used to hang out at the campus center. There was a room in the campus center where we played games, and you know, I would cut class and play games. So I really did. Maybe I majored in Dungeons and Dragons and minored in computer science. Well, 3 years into it, they called me in and they said, Mr. Rogers, what are you doing? And I said, what do you mean? What am I doing? It says, well, you haven't taken any of your core requirements. And I said, I've already been to high school. So I said, I have no intention of taking your core requirements. And he said, well, if you're not going to take your core requirements, you're not going to graduate. And I said, there must be some mistake. I'm not here to graduate. I'm here to get an education. And I got my education. Thank you very much. And so after 3 years of going to UH, I chased a girl to Japan and ended up living in Japan for 18 years. So moving to Japan, my father, who was an avid Go player, Japanese board game, somehow in his mind thought that at that point, I'm the oldest of 8 boys, okay? I'm the oldest of 8 boys. And we were in New York before that, and he saw me turning into a hippie. That's what happens to, you know, a young guy in 1972. You become a hippie. I dressed funny, and you know, I'm sure he thought I was on all kinds of drugs, which I wasn't, by the way. I just dressed funny. I just dressed like all the other kids in school. Well, my dad was all panicked and he thought, oh my God, I'm going to have 8 kids on drugs here. We better move our kids to someplace safe. So he decides to move the kids to Japan. Okay. So here I am. I chase a girl to Japan. My siblings are and my parents are already there. Anyway, I, being the oldest, end up working for him, which I don't know if work is the right word for it because he never paid me. I was slave labor. I'm the oldest, so it's a family business. So you work your ass off and you get every once in a while to get a handout. So that gem business ended up taking me to Bangkok, and I was in Bangkok for a year, and he got the idea that Thai gem people, what they do is they heat treat rubies and sapphires to change the color and the clarity. And they were using LPG, liquefied petroleum gas, furnaces. And his theory was that they wouldn't be able to control the atmospheric conditions by using a gas furnace. Of course, because you've got a mixture of oxygen or air and fuel. And, by mixing those slightly different, you either get a slightly reducing or slightly oxidizing atmosphere. So he asked me to build electric ovens where we could control the atmosphere. Okay, so take me back. I'm not an engineer. I don't know anything about electricity. I don't know anything about any of this stuff. And so I read some books about how to make what do you call it, for pottery kilns. I read a book about pottery kilns and how to make the wire and how to control the temperature and so on and so forth. But pottery kilns only go up to like 1500 degrees Celsius. And we needed to go to 1900 degrees Celsius. Basically, every metal that we know besides tungsten and molybdenum melt before that. So I ended up making an electric oven that would go up to 1900 degrees using molybdenum as the heating element. I learned how to calculate watt load and learn how to control the electricity. And to keep molybdenum from burning at 400 degrees Celsius, you cannot have any oxygen present in the chamber where you're heating the element. And I tried all kinds of different gases. I tried helium, I tried nitrogen, and every inert gas, no matter how much I would flush it, there would still be some oxygen left at the end. And that little bit of oxygen would attack the wire, and the wire would get thin, overheat, and then break. So I ended up using hydrogen. So I had an oven with a molybdenum. I'm trying to tell you this because it's engineering kind of stuff. I learned a lot about hydrogen. I learned a lot about heat treatment of rubies and sapphires. But, people pay money for more money for a slightly different color of a little piece of glass. And I just have no respect for it. Sorry. I could never love it like my dad loved it. And and of course he didn't pay me. That didn't help. And I'm in Bangkok, and my third child is born while I was in Bangkok, in Japan. So that was it. That I'm not going back to. I got to go to Japan to see my new kid. I said I'm not going back, and so I had to find something else to do. Well, just about that time, personal computers came out in Japan, and I said, "Oh, I can program." And I had a friend who was making an accounting program, and it was a disaster. We went to talk to Hitachi, and they had no future. I could tell already immediately. So I said, okay. I went to Akihabara, and I found out what sells. And what was selling was games. I thought, hell, I can make a game. So what kind of games are there in Akihabara? And they're mostly like little shoot 'em up games or adventure games. Back then we're talking about games that the maximum memory you have is 64K. And these games were stored on cassette tape. So it would take you like 15, 20 minutes to load your game before you could even get to play it. Those are the days. This is before Nintendo or any of that. So anyway, I decided to make a role-playing game in 64K. How stupid is that? I mean, I've never heard of a dumber thing than that. I had no idea how much 64K was. All I'd ever done was homework assignments, and so I had no idea what 64K looked like. And I was going to make this game. It was going to be huge, and I had all these features. It was like World of Warcraft, what I had in my mind, and all I could make was this. I had to throw out all these parts of the game, and come up with like the essential of role playing. Well, that turned out to be a good idea because people in Japan had no idea what a role playing game was. Wasn't like the States where people played Dungeons and Dragons, and then when they went to the computer, they already knew what they were doing. No, I went to SoftBank and I showed them the demo of the game, and at first they said, "Well, we'll buy 3,000 copies, before Christmas." And then come Christmas, they say, "Oh, well, we're sorry, but we can only buy 600. And I'm going like, oh my God, I'm dead in the water. Nobody knows what a role-playing game is. My game is going to be released. It's going to fade into history. Nobody's going to know what happened. And so it's January after Christmas. And, I've got like 2 more months of money before we completely run out of money. So I asked my crew, so how do people in Japan figure out, how do they find out about games? I said, well, they read about them in the magazines. I said, well, how do you get into the magazine? I says, well, you have a hit game, and then the magazine comes to interview you, and that's how you win. Well, that's obviously not happening to me because nobody knows what a role-playing game is. So I said, okay, I'm going to go and visit every magazine. This is a whole different new strategy. I'm going to visit every magazine and teach them how to play a role-playing game, which is what I did. And I went to every magazine with an interpreter because I didn't speak a word of Japanese yet at that point in time. And I said, I made each of the magazine people, the writers, a character, and then said, okay, now you get to play. Every single one of these people played for weeks and couldn't stop playing. And come March, I had rave reviews in the magazines. And April, we had 10,000 unit order. And May, it's 10,000 units. And like we went through the whole year, 10,000, 10,000, 10,000. We were the #1 game in Japan in 1984. So that was the hardest thing I ever did, by the way, in my life, is make that game. Because, making a role-playing game in 64K, ask any programmer, that's a ridiculous thing. So anyway, so I end up with a publishing company. I wrote the first couple of games for the company. And I realized, I'm going to have to make a choice here. Either I run the company or I make the games. And I thought, what is my life going to look like 10 years, 20 years from now? Am I going to be doing all-nighters making games? Or am I going to be sitting in the president's chair, making money? I decided that was a better solution. So I hired people to make the games. I started traveling around the world looking for games to bring to Japan. And so I would go to the Consumer Electronics Show, I would go to game show in London, and I would find games to license and then bring to Japan. That's what was happening with music at that time. Hit music would come from the States. Somebody would license it, and the Japanese artist would sing the Japanese version of that song, and it would become a hit in Japan. So why not with games? So I did a lot of different games. I licensed Electronic Arts' first games. I licensed Star Wars, all the Star Wars games. But actually in 1988 at the Consumer Electronics Show, I found a little game called Tetris. And that Tetris game kind of changed everything because, I published it on 8 different personal computer platforms. I published it on the Nintendo family computer, which in the US is called the NES, the Nintendo Entertainment System. And that was the year that Game Boy came out. And Game Boy came out in Japan first. And I thought, wow, Tetris is the perfect game for Game Boy. Why? The Game Boy, the screen is tiny. And that if you have a bullet, that bullet becomes a dot. So it's really hard to see all these little tiny things that happen on the screen. And Tetris had big square blocks, so they take up a lot of real estate. So it's easy to see. So I thought, wow, this is a great game. Not only that, but I'd figured out that by that time that everybody in the company played. The women, old people, young people, everybody played. And so I decided to go and visit Nintendo USA, and I made a deal with Mr. Arakawa. I said, Mr. Arakawa, I think because their policy was to release, every time they release a piece of hardware, they would release, they would include a game. And they were going to include Mario. I said, Mr. Arakawa, if you want little boys to buy your Game Boy, then include Mario. But if you want everyone to buy your Game Boy, include Tetris. And then you can still sell Mario after that. And he called in people, and finally, yeah, he said that's a good idea. So I shook his hand. He asked me how much. I said, I need $1 a unit and $1 million up front. I'm just pulling big numbers out of my out of a hat. And a month later, I'm on a plane to Moscow, and on a tourist visa. And I track down the Ministry of Software, Hardware and Software. Turns out these guys, their other business was, they were arms dealers. So, I mean, there's very few Russian or Soviet companies that can actually do business outside the Soviet Union, but arms was one of them, definitely. Anyway, there's a movie coming out, for those of you interested, and it's coming out in March, about that whole story of me finding Tetris and then ending up in Moscow and so on. And the guy that played Elton John in Rocket Man plays me. He doesn't look anything like me, but he's a really good actor. So the story isn't anything like what really happened, but it's a really good story. So, you know, it is what it is. So I licensed Tetris to Game Boy. And I end up in Moscow, and I meet the guy who created Tetris. And I said, "Can I pay you?" And he said, "What? You want I should go to jail?" I said, "No, we're going to make a lot of money off this game. You should get something." It is not allowed. It is not allowed. What do you mean? This is communism. It's like, oh my goodness, you're not allowed to. Well, how about this? Make a wish. Make a wish, and I'll see if I can make your wish come true. So he made a wish, and his wish was called Elfish, and it was his idea was that at some point every TV was going to have 386 built in or connected to it, and he thought a dead TV, a TV with an aquarium would be better than a dead TV. So let's make an aquarium. Anyway, that was it. And the idea was that you would mate the male fish with the female fish, and it would take characteristic from both parents' fish and create a whole generation of new fish. And it would automatically create all of the animation phases for the new fish. And I was like, this is insane. Like genetically generated animation. It just sounded so what do you need? I said, well, I can hire the professors. He's going to need 11 professors. Well, what I need is computers. It's like, okay, you got it. So I brought in a bunch of computers on my next trip, and the company was called Animatech for Animation Technologies. I guess it's my second company. It went up and it went down because I'm a computer game guy, and this is like computer graphics technology, which is a whole different distribution channel, and I was just not very good at it. So fast forward, it's 1995 now, and I realize in the world that there's a thing called the internet is happening, and it's happening in the US, but it's not happening in Japan. Why? It's because NTT decided to charge an arm and a leg for connection. So nobody had internet for their computer. So there was no computer internet business. There's no online or nothing like that. So I said, I got to move to California. I end up in San Francisco. I did that for about 7 years before I figured out I'm not making any money in the .com. You know, I'm an old school guy. You make something, you sell it, you make money. But the way the .com guys were doing is you write a business plan, you get VCs to put a bunch of money in your company. It doesn't matter if you don't sell anything. And I just couldn't figure that one out. So my next foray was what had happened in Japan. Instead of having internet for the computer, we ended up having internet on the phone. And so all of a sudden, all these games came out on phones in Japan because the phones had to be able to do internet. And in 2002, Sprint was going to be the first company to come out with a phone where you could actually play a game. It had a camera and it had a screen. So a camera and a screen meant that you could play games. So I started a company. This time it could be anywhere because we're back to 64K. And so I decided to start that company in Hawaii. Why not? It could be anywhere. And so I hired all students from UH, whole programming team. And I said, I didn't want anybody with experience, because if you have experience, making giant games for like console. And now we're back to 64K. So I needed people who didn't have that like mindset of, I need more memory. And we made Tetris. The name of that company is Blue Lava Wireless. We ended up having 50 people. We're at the Manoa Innovation Center. 50 people, most of them were testers because we had to test Tetris on every handset that came out anywhere in the world. That company, I sold that company 3 years later. So what did I sell it for? Oh my gosh. This is, by the way, if a company in your space goes public, that is the time to sell your company, because that's the time when your valuation is going to be the highest. So a company went public in my space, and in order for them to stay number one, and if you're number one company, you get a 20% bump in your valuation. So in order for them to stay number one, they needed the number one IP, which I had, which was Tetris. So they bought my company. They basically gave me all the money they made by going public, which was $67 million. And they gave me 4 million shares of stock in their company, which was valued at $16 per share. So that's about what, $64 million in addition. I couldn't sell that. When you get stock, you can only sell it little by little. But what happened was a year later, Electronic Arts bought them. And so my $16 a share stock became $27 a share cash. And so that was my exit. That was 2005. That was my first exit. A month later, I found myself in the back of an ambulance. I've been playing tennis at Waialae Country Club, and I didn't feel well. They were going to take me in for observation. And during the ride to to Straub, I asked them to take me to Straub. The blank hit the fan. I knew this because they turned on the siren, and the guy was in the cockpit, like, preparing the OR for me to arrive. He told me later he didn't think I was going to make it. I had 100% blockage of the widowmaker, the largest artery in your heart. And in the back of that ambulance, I'm looking at the ceiling. First thing I said is like, you got to be kidding me. I haven't spent any of the money yet. That was the first thing I thought. And I said, no. The second I said, no, hell no, I'm not going. I still have stuff to do. And I have 2 stents. I'm fine. I was lucky. If I'd have been on the Big Island, I would have died that day, because it takes major angioplasty facility to be able to recover from that kind of thing. And I was already in the ambulance. That, the doctor said, that's the best decision you ever made in your entire life. Okay, so in the recovery room, it's like, okay, so what did I mean by stuff? I'd already made enough money, so my wife didn't need me anymore. My kids were already out of college, so they didn't need me anymore. So what do I mean by stuff? And I decided to work it back from the end of my life. What's going to piss me off if I didn't do anything about it at the end of my life? And I came up with my missions in life. And I'll rattle through my missions. end the use of carbon-based fuel, end war, make a backup of life by going to other planets, and find out how the universe ends and do something about it. So I'm going to leave that last one to you guys, and you're going to figure that one out, because the other three are hard enough for me. I'm going to talk briefly about mission number 3, and I'll finish with mission number 1. Number 1. So do we have a video teed up? Anybody?
Justin?
The high seas video?
Yes. Okay, I'll play that right now.
Okay.
One small step for man, one giant
Can't
leap
see it. Oh, there it is. Yeah.
Justin, audio is sharing.
You know what? If it's not going to work, just skip the video. I can just talk. Yeah, forget the video. Sorry about that, guys. So I started taking going to all these space-related conferences, and one day this woman shows up. She's got this project where they're going to study living on Mars, and it's a cooperation between University of Hawaii and NASA. And she comes to me and she says, "We have a problem." And I said, "What's the problem?" The problem is that neither UH nor NASA can own a habitat. And if I could please own the habitat and they would rent it from me. I said, sure, I'll own it and rent it to you. But if I own it, it isn't going to be a piece of crap, because I've seen the other habitats around the world, the analogs, and they're all junk. And I am a true believer that you send somebody to Mars, you know, that's a 22-month mission, 8 months to go, 6 months to wait while the Earth comes around, 8 months to come back. We better be giving them some really comfortable digs. I mean, it can't just be a piece of metal. It can't be like they're inside of a tank or inside of a submarine. It has to be comfortable. So we basically canned the team that was making it. We spent a month in design, and 3 months we built it, and it's called High Seas, Hawaii Space Exploration Analog and Simulation. We did 5 missions, 4 months, 4 months, 8 months, and 12 months. Oh, 4 months, 4 months, 8 months, 12 months, 8 months. What a mission means is that 6 people stay inside of a small dome. If they go outside, they have to wear a spacesuit. And if they communicate with the outside world, we delay that signal 20 minutes each way. So these people are basically stuck with each other for the entire mission. And it was mostly about psychology. That High Seas is still up there, and I invite students from UH to come and spend time at High Seas if you're interested in space at all, because it's a very interesting thing that we're doing on the Big Island. The lava flow just missed us. It took out MLO, and it took, MLO, Mauna Loa Observatory, but our High Seas, it just cut off the road. It didn't destroy MLO. So cut off their power, cut off their access, but we still have access, and we're off grid. So power, we don't need power anyway. So then, yes. So I fell in love with the ocean, and I read, when I was in that hospital recovery room, I read an article that said, oh, by the way, we're going to kill all the coral in the world by the end of the century. And what's causing that is ocean acidification. What's causing that is carbon dioxide. What's causing that? We are. So, I mean, how stupid can we be? You know, we think that, oh, the world can live without coral. Yes, it can. But the world can also live without us. And if we're going to wipe out the coral, we're wiping out all kinds of other things that we're not even measuring, like plankton. You know, so, I mean, if we're going to collapse the food chain of the ocean and think that it's nothing to do with that, we got another thing coming. Anyway, global warming and all of that stuff is all caused by carbon dioxide. So mission number 1 is to end the use of carbon-based fuel. And so I started the foundation, Blue Planet Foundation in Hawaii, because I believe that before I can ask other people to clean their room, I have to clean my room. And my room at that time is Hawaii. And so formed the Blue Planet Foundation. We did everything. I mean, we tried everything. But finally in 2015, we had a big success. We managed to pass a mandate through the legislature that says that Hawaii has to go 100% renewable energy by 2045. Who was fighting us the whole time? It was the electric company. They were saying, no, we can't. And once we passed the mandate, 6 months later, they said, oh yeah, we figured it out. We can, and we can do it by 2040. It's like they never looked at it before. They never had to. More recently, we changed the business model of the utility so they make more money by switching to renewables. Guess who's our best friend now? So Hawaii is on track to go 100% by 2045. We already hit our target, our 2030 target of 40%. So we're way ahead of schedule. And now I'm in New York. I want to do the same thing for the rest of the countries in the world, starting with island countries. So last year we signed up Guam, we signed up Palau, we signed up Tonga, Tuvalu, and this year we hope to do more and more, and start the domino effect outside the US. By the way, 12 other states and territories copied our legislation in the US. So that's already happening. But the rest of the world, I need to give them a push. And that's what I'm doing in New York. And now I'm going to stop talking and I'm going to start answering questions.
Thank you so much for all of your insight. It was really cool to hear about how your life has kind of flowed all the way up to this point and how you have these like big major goals that you're trying to reach right now. So for the audience in person, if you have a question, just raise your hand, and then on Zoom, feel free to just type in the chat. I will start off with our first question though. So you mentioned a little bit about your space exploration interest, and I was just wondering how it became so important to you when it doesn't seem to directly relate to computers and games and stuff like that.
Yeah, so the way I look at it is there's a couple of things. If all of life as we know it is here on Earth, if something happens to Earth, it's all gone. It took the universe, I don't know, 3 billion years of life on Earth to get to the point where we are now. And yet we have no evidence that life has ever left this planet. It's all here. And I look at life as we know it as one thing. You can call it Gaia, you can call it Mother Earth. And my theory, like we may be the brain cells, but we're part of a much bigger organism. It all has to work together. Well, Mother Earth is pregnant, and we are it. We are the way Mother Earth has a baby. And what does a baby mean? Is we take life as we know it to another planet and get life as we know it started there. I mean, all we really have to do is go to someplace similar to Earth and throw out the garbage, and we have created life on another planet. So to go to other, of course, the planets in our solar system are really not very friendly to us. There's not enough water, there's no atmosphere. But if we go to the moon and Mars and learn to live on the moon and Mars, by the way, no colony has ever survived on this planet that was waiting for food and supplies from the home country. If you didn't learn how to live off the land, you died. And so if we don't know how to learn how to live off the land on the moon and Mars, we die. And so to be able to live sustainable, to be able to live in those places, we have to learn how to live sustainably. And water becomes precious, air becomes precious. There's, at $1 million a kilo send stuff to the moon, there's not going to be any garbage. Everything has to be used for something else. And all the technology that we learn about how to live on the moon and Mars will teach us how to live here. I mean, just think of the space program, all the things that gotten us, solar panels. I mean, thing after the computers, all these things were invented and paid for by the space program. So yeah, even if we're not successful, the amount of technology we gain out of it is going to be unbelievable. And it's going to help us solve the problem here.
Wow, I didn't realize so many of our sustainable innovations have come from space, actually. Yeah.
And
So,
everything we know about this planet comes from space too, and GPS. Like what's going on in this world, weather. I mean, we know I can know what the weather is going to be here in New York next week. I mean, that's all space technology. So anyway, yeah, I'm sorry. I don't mean to go on and on.
no, it's very cool to hear about this. So, what guidance would you give to students like us who have some out-of-box passions?
Some out of what?
Out of the box passions.
Okay, the answer is don't get in the box. If you have an out of the box passion, stay outside of that box and live your passion. You know, all of the people that have been successful in the world got out of the box, and the rest of the people work for them. So if you have an out of the box passion, stay out of that box. There you go.
Thank you.
So you also kind of talked about like energy and the environment. So how did you kind of get so interested in that, and how your efforts to be like off the grid seemed ahead of the time?
Well, yeah, again, it started with the coral, but it's, you know, we're not just destroying the coral, we're basically destroying nature. We're doing our best. And nature, by the way, will do just fine without us. It'll be another mass extinction. Maybe 95% of the species will go out, but nature will recover. That's what it does. But we won't. Not if we destroy nature. The nature that we know is the environment that we evolved in. So we like it to be nice and warm. We like it to have a certain amount of rain. We like to have vegetables. You know, there's all these different things that we like about our environment. And if we mess it up too badly, that stuff goes away. That means we go away. So we could say it's selfish, but I'm representing all the people in the future. You know, I have children, I have grandchildren. So I could say, yeah, I want my grandchildren to live in a world that resembles the world that I grew up in. But it's much more than that. We all have children, and we will all have children. So what kind of world are we creating for them? That's unreasonable. And we have the technology to get us out of this. We have to use it. And I'm gonna say this, but it's up to the engineers to make that happen. That's you.
Yes, that is. Switching gears a little bit, you mentioned being the oldest of 8. How was like your childhood like, and how did that impact the way you kind of grew up?
Yeah, so my mom was a single mom, married my stepfather when I was 7 years old, and then they had like a ton of kids, Vatican roulette, if anybody knows what that means. So there was quite a gap between me and number 2, 7 years. And so I was always like the big brother. I was somewhere in between the parents and the kids. I used to call them the kids. We used to call them the kids. So being in that position, I always had to be the example of what a big brother should be like. And so I've kind of gone through life being big brother to not in the 1984 evil way, but in sort of like, yeah, I feel that all of the companies that I've ever started, I feel like I'm the big brother to the people that end up working for me. So we're like a family, and I'm the big brother. I'm not the father, because my father told me what to do and he never listened to me. So I'm not that. I listen to people. So that's a difference. But yeah, it certainly has shaped my personality, being the big. I'm still the big brother, for Christ's sakes, and I'm like, what? I'm going to turn 70 this year. So, big brother.
Wow, yeah, it does seem like that. Like especially about the climate and everything, you're just trying to help future generations as well?
Yeah, it's, like ultimately that is, somehow genetics is selfish. And basically we try to think about genetics in terms of our genes surviving, just, or me, like what about my children, that kind of thing. But I think the world has changed. It's we don't just learn from our parents, we learn from a whole bunch of different people. And we as individuals don't just interact with our siblings, we interact with, I don't know, thousands of other people. And what's happening in the world is we're all being connected. And it's this device that's connecting us. I can, if I dialed enough numbers, I could probably call anybody in the world. So that is a new thing. That is like before and after. If you look at what makes our brain different from the brain of, say, a whale that has the same mass or more, we have more connections. That's it. We have more connections. More of our neurons are connected to more of our neurons, and we have a network, and that gives us intelligence. And so now that we're starting to be connected to other people, yeah, I can say we're probably already connected, except for the poor people in the world that don't have electricity. We are pretty much connected, and that gives us something called a collective consciousness. And a collective consciousness should be able to do things like think about itself going forward. It's a collective consciousness. It's no longer about the individual brain cells. It's about the whole organism. And if the organism is sick, the organism needs to go to the doctor and gets fixed. Well, guess what? Mother Nature is sick. We're the ones causing it, and we're also the doctor that needs to fix it. So we better get busy, roll up our sleeves and get busy doing that.
For sure. We have a big responsibility growing up now.
So you mentioned that you kind of worked in the family business for a bit with like gems and jewelry, but you weren't really interested in it as much as your father was. How did you kind of motivate yourself throughout that time?
How did I what?
Motivate yourself.
Oh, motivate. Oh, well, I love building things. So when it got down to the point of me building those high temp ovens, I was in new territory. I had to learn something new, build something that nobody had ever built before. So yeah, I felt proud of myself for having done it, first of all. And I did it in Bangkok, for Christ's sakes. I had to import all the materials because there's no, the materials that I needed to do all that stuff not available in Bangkok. So just to make it a little bit more difficult, and yet I did it. So the challenge was exciting, and getting the result, that was also exciting. So yeah, maybe it's alchemy, whatever. That's the exciting part. As far as why people buy gems, I can't understand the value in gems. I shouldn't say that. People do, like diamonds. I even buy I've bought stuff myself, but I don't wear anything. Nothing. It doesn't attract me. So yeah, I couldn't wait to get away from my dad's business.
All your projects, you seem very, I guess, interested in doing like something very new and very exciting. So that's kind of cool to see you do that. It's very inspiring.
Yeah, so these are all outside the box stuff, and I like to live outside the box. If I'm inside the box, I might as well. It's like when I sold my company, everyone is expecting me to move to Maui and live in a gated community and play golf. And I said, you might as well kill me now. that is the worst thing that I could think of. It's like being stuck in a gated community, not being able to build anything. It's unthinkable. So I have a little ranch on the Big Island, and I built myself a lab where we can actually build anything. So like the Bat Cave kind of thing. It's fun. You guys should come visit.
For sure. Um, the next question that we have for you is, your primary audience right now is college students in engineering. I know you talked a little bit about your college experience, but where does education fit into the big picture of things from your perspective?
Education, well, first of all, if it wasn't for education, we'd still, we would be like people living in Afghanistan or someplace. Just think of places where there is no education. It's like ridiculous. So of course, education is the most important thing for development of young people to move into the world and be able to fix or change or do something in the world. But I think education should change from being like memorizing knowledge to figuring out how to use knowledge. If you go back a couple of 100 years, if you were very smart, you could have read a lot of books and you could maybe know everything there is to know in the world back then, if you were well read. But there's no way that we can possibly do that today. And so the trick of surviving in this world or thriving in this world today is to be able to access that knowledge. And the internet has done like an amazing job. I remember I used to have in my house, we used to have an encyclopedia. What the hell? How kind of ancient thing is that? You'd look something up and it'd be like 5 years old. There's no new information in there. So yeah, having access to information, having access to people that are using that information, that are doing incredible things. It's much more about that. In a perfect world, education would be projects. Give me a project. Say, what's the thing that I want to build, and then let's go and build that. Something new, something that hasn't been built before. Let's just a group of students get together and figure it out. We might need an engineer, we might need a writer, we might need a photographer, different talents. But that's the way the real world works. When you join a company, they don't give you a book and say, read this book and we're going to give you a test a month later, and that's how you get paid. That's not how it works. So it's completely different. They give you something to do. They say, go do this and come back when it's finished. That's what we have to learn in school. And yeah, so I'm a little frustrated still that there's a lot of, taking the test when there should be demo day, when we show off what we've built. And I know engineering does some of that, and I appreciate that.
Yeah, we do. That's kind of why I liked engineering in the first place, was because we got to do things hands-on, like physically watch things work, or like make the LED light up or something like that. I think that's why a lot of us like engineering too.
Yeah, I think my favorite part about like going to school here is working on the projects. It's getting that hands-on experience and actually doing the stuff is a lot more is very enjoyable. So we have questions from the audience. One of them is when you need to learn something new, like how to make a better kiln or how to understand the effects of climate change, what have you found to be the most effective methods to learn the new technology?
Find the person who knows the most about it and talk to him or her. That's the most of it. There's somebody out there who's been studying this, who knows like the end of the universe. Very interesting. I knew nothing about it, and so I tried to crowdsource it on Facebook. I said, does anybody know anything about the end of the universe on Facebook? And lo and behold, one of my Facebook friends raised his hand and said, you remember me? I said, yeah, you're the younger brother of my high school girlfriend. Well, good on you for remembering who I am. Do you remember the fortune teller lady that stayed at your house? I said, yeah. She predicted that I was going to go to Antarctica, and I thought that was ridiculous because I was a piss poor student in New York. How the hell am I ever going to get to go to Antarctica? Well, I've been to Antarctica. I've taken my entire family to Antarctica. What did she say about you? Well, she said about me that I was going to study abroad and become a great scientist. And we both thought, all of her predictions were ridiculous. Well, what happened to him is he ended up going to Oxford and studying astrophysics. And now he's a tenured professor of cosmology at Columbia University. So she was pretty spot on with her prediction. And so I said, we should get together. And he said, I'm coming to Hawaii next February. This is a long time ago, by the way. So what's going on? I said, we have a gathering of cosmologists. I said, oh my God, this is a dream. So I got 25 of the cosmologists, brought them to my ranch, fed them, got them drunk, and we talked about the end of the universe. I learned so much about the end of the universe just in that moment. And yeah, most of the discussion was like how many decades, because they used to think they knew something about something, but today, because of dark matter and dark energy, they're pretty sure they know nothing about nothing now. And so the discussion was how many decades before I should call them back where they might know something. Dark matter, maybe a couple of decades, and nobody had any idea that they would ever figure out what dark energy was. So anyway, but hang out with people that know something or that study it, and then you can absorb a huge amount. And then you can find out where your interest is in that field. And if you have an interest in that field somewhere, then you can do a deeper dive.
Moving on to the last question from us before we call up Dr. Choi. What is the most important key to a successful leader?
Well, I would say determination. People, when I give speeches, people ask me, in the Q&A, do you have hope that we're going to solve climate change? And I said, no, I do not have hope. I have determination. This is something that we are going to solve. And if you were waiting for somebody to come and do it for you, get out of the way, because there's a bunch of us who are going to make it work, and we have determination. So either you get on board, get some determination and show some leadership, or get out of the way. We're going to get this done. We're doing this no matter what. We're going to fix climate change no matter what. That's just the way it is. We've got enough firepower in terms of mental firepower in the world to get this done. There's enough money. There's enough of everything. It's just that we have to make the decision that we're going to do this, just like we made the decision in Hawaii.